Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on one single, really powerful idea from the psychologist Alfred Adler. An idea he believed could explain, well, pretty much everything we do. Let's get right into it. So let me just ask you this right off the bat. From your absolute biggest dreams to the tiny little things you do every day, what is the single force driving it all? I mean, that's one of the biggest questions there is. And even though that seems like an impossibly huge question, Alfred Adler came along and said, you know what? The answer is actually pretty simple. He managed to boil down all of our complex motivations to one fundamental journey that every single one of us is on. And that journey? It begins at the exact same place for everyone, a totally universal starting point. It doesn't matter where you were born, who your parents are, none of that. It just has to do with the simple fact that you're human. Adler's entire theory kicks off right here with what he called feelings of inferiority. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds pretty bad, right? But for Adler, this wasn't some kind of flaw or weakness. Not at all. It was just a simple fact of life. We all start out as these tiny, weak, completely dependent babies. That feeling isn't a problem we need to fix, it's our launch pad. In fact, he actually went so far as to say we are blessed with this feeling. Blessed! Why on earth would he say that? Well, because that initial feeling of being small, of being incomplete, is what lights the fuse. It's the catalyst that pushes us to grow, to learn, to overcome, and to spend the rest of our lives striving to feel whole. So if that feeling of inferiority is the spark, what's the engine it gets going? This brings us to the absolute heart of Adler's theory. He called it the striving force. Adler said this is the one dynamic force behind everything, and I mean everything we do. It's this constant built-in push away from that early feeling of weakness and this constant pull toward a feeling of strength, completion, and success. But here's where it gets really interesting. If every single person on the planet has this same fundamental engine, why are we all so wildly different? Why do we end up in such different places? Because according to Adler, this universal striving force leads every one of us to a massive fork in the road.
And this is that fork. The single drive we all have leads us to a fundamental choice. We can channel all that energy down one of two paths. The first is the quest for personal superiority, where life is basically a big competition to be won. The other path is about collective success, where the real goal is to lift everyone up together. Adler believed that every action we take, whether we know it or not, is on one of these two paths.
All right, let's dig into that first path, the drive for personal superiority. At its core, this is the path of me first. Me first, me first. So who walks down this road? You've got the obvious examples, right? Criminals, thieves, con artists, people who clearly put their own gain above everyone else. But Adler's idea is way more subtle than that. It also describes people with a deep-seated inferiority complex, who feel like they have to dominate others just to feel okay. And this is the really tricky one. It can even look like someone who's super helpful on the surface, but secretly, it's all about them getting the credit, them being seen as the most important one in the room. The key takeaway for this path is that it's fundamentally unproductive for society. It's all fueled by this exaggerated, kind of gnawing feeling of being less than. And the goal is always to prove you're better than somebody else, no matter the cost to the people around you. Okay, so now let's go over to the other side of that fork, which leads to a completely different kind of life, the path of collective success. This is the path that Adler connected with real psychological health. And you know, this quote from Adler just nails the mindset of this path perfectly. For people here, their own ego just isn't the main character of the story. The real victory isn't about getting a medal or having their name in lights. It's about seeing the entire community, the entire group move forward. So, what does this look like in the real world? Well, these are the folks who are driven by what Adler called social interest. They look at other people and see partners, not competitors. They'll help you out without thinking, okay, so what's in it for me? And their sense of self-worth? It's not tied to being at the top of the pyramid. It's tied to what they can contribute to the whole. Their success doesn't come at the expense of others. It includes them. Okay, so this leaves us with the million-dollar question. What decides which path we take? Why do some of us go for personal glory while others strive for the good of the group? Adler believed the answer lies in this kind of hidden blueprint that we create for ourselves. He called this the fictional final goal. It's this subconscious, totally personalized picture of what success or making it really looks like to you. It's fictional because it doesn't actually exist in reality, but man, is it powerful. It acts like an internal compass that gives direction to everything you do and pulls your whole personality together. And here is the absolutely wild part. Adler claimed we pretty much set this final goal for ourselves by the time we are just 4 or 5 years old. We use what he called our creative power to take the raw materials of our life, our genes, our family, our environment, and we actively shape our own goal, our own personality. It isn't just given to us. So how does that goal get set? Well, Adler pointed right back to our earliest experiences. A child who experiences neglect or, on the flip side, is totally pampered, learns that the world revolves around them, either their needs or their wants. This shapes a very unconscious, self-centered goal, which sets them squarely on the path of personal superiority. But in contrast, a child who grows up with love and security learns that they are part of a cooperative world. Their goal becomes more conscious, more focused on others, and that naturally leads them right to the path of collective success. So that's Adler's big idea in a nutshell. A universal feeling of being small ignites a lifelong striving force that sends us all down one of two paths, guided by a fictional, secret goal we set for ourselves when we were kids. And all of that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. When you really look at your own motivations, which path do you think is guiding you?
What if I told you that everything you do, every goal you chase, isn't based on facts, but on fiction? Today, we're diving into the work of psychologist Alfred Adler and his truly mind-bending idea that our lives are guided not by reality, but by the powerful stories we tell ourselves.
So let me just ask you, right off the bat, what do you think really drives you? When you make a choice, what's the engine behind it? Is it something from your past that's pushing you along, or could it be something else, something pulling you from the future? You know, this is where Adler really parted ways with someone you've definitely heard of, Sigmund Freud. Freud's whole thing was causality, the idea that your past, your childhood, your traumas, they all push you from behind and determine who you are. But Adler, he flipped that completely on its head. He believed in teleology. It's a fancy word, but it just means we are pulled forward by our goals, by our vision of what we want to become.
Okay, so let's get into Adler's first big and honestly kind of wild idea, that your personal beliefs, your fictions, literally create the world that you live in.
Here's the core of it. Adler argued that it's not the objective, hard facts world that shapes your behavior. No, it's your subjective perception of it. It's your own personal filter, your internal map of the world that's really in the driver's seat.
Now, Adler didn't just pull this out of thin air. He borrowed it from a philosopher named Hans Weihinger, who had this concept called fictionalism. And the big idea here is that we all live our lives as if certain ideas are true, even if we can't actually prove they exist in the real world. According to Adler, the biggest, most important fiction we have is the goal of success or superiority that we set for ourselves. Whether you know it or not, that goal becomes this sort of master story that directs pretty much everything you do. And some of these fictions might be ones you've never even thought of as fictions.
For example, take free will. Can anyone, anywhere, scientifically prove that it exists? Nope. And yet, almost all of us get up every day and act as if we're in charge of our choices. Our entire legal and moral systems are built on this unprovable idea. It's a useful fiction.
Now, the source material gives a more, let's say, problematic example. For huge chunks of history, many people acted as if this idea were true. And that belief, that fiction, had very real and very damaging consequences on society and individuals. It just goes to show how powerful these fictions can be, for good or for ill. Or how about this one? The belief in a higher power who keeps score. Now, for Adler, whether this is objectively, factually true is completely beside the point. What matters is that for billions of people, acting as if it's true is a powerful guiding force in their lives. It shapes their choices every single day.
So if we're all living by these fictions, what gives them their power? This brings us to the engine of Adler's whole theory, the idea that it's the future, not the past, that pulls us forward and gives our lives meaning. And you can really see the difference here. On one side, you have Freud's causality, which is all backward-looking, A cause in your past leads to an effect in your present. You're being pushed. On the other side is Adler's teleology, which is all forward-looking. Your actions today serve a purpose tomorrow. You're being pulled. The entire question changes from what happened to me to what am I trying to achieve? And this is what gives our lives a single, unified story. Adler would say that even if you can't quite put your finger on your ultimate goal, this pull toward the future is what organizes everything you do into a consistent pattern. It's the secret purpose behind it all.
But where does the drive for all this striving come from? Well, this leads us to the final and maybe the most beautiful and paradoxical part of Adler's theory. The idea that our flaws, our feelings of weakness, are actually a gift, a blessing.
I mean, just think about it. Every single person on this planet starts out as a tiny, helpless, completely dependent baby. Adler said that this universal experience of being small, weak, and inferior lights a fire in us, a lifelong drive to overcome it, to become bigger, stronger, and more capable.
And he was a physician, so he meant this physically too. He actually said that we are blessed with these weaknesses. He used that word blessed because he saw them as the very thing that kicks our growth into high gear. It's the stimulus for perfection.
And this is that push-pull distinction in action. A physical weakness doesn't cause you to become a certain way. No. Instead, it's your subjective feeling about that weakness that provides the motivation, the pull, toward a future where you've overcome it. History is just packed with examples. Demosthenes had a stutter, so he worked until he became one of the greatest speakers in history. Beethoven wrote some of his most incredible music as he was going deaf. And Adler himself was a very sick kid who almost died, so he was driven to conquer illness by becoming a doctor. In every case, their inferiority became the engine for their greatness.
So I want to leave you with this question. Adler's whole idea is that we live by these fictions that pull us toward a future we've imagined. So take a second and really think about it. What is the great as-if that's guiding your life? What is that powerful, unprovable fiction that gives you a reason to get up in the morning and pulls you forward every single day?
All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever looked at someone, or hey, even yourself, and just thought, that makes absolutely zero sense? You know, one day they're incredibly generous, the next they're kind of selfish. They say they want one thing, but then they do the complete opposite. It really feels like we're all just these walking bundles of contradictions. But what if we're not? I mean, really think about it for a second. We've all seen it. The friend who's always complaining about being broke, but, is constantly showing off new stuff. Or that coworker who swears they hate office drama, but somehow is always right in the middle of it. It's confusing, right? It's one of the great puzzles of just being a person. Why do we act in ways that seem so inconsistent? And this is where things get really interesting. A pretty groundbreaking psychologist, Alfred Adler, he looked at this exact puzzle and came to a conclusion that was, it was radical. He said, people aren't full of contradictions. In fact, he argued that true inconsistency doesn't even exist. That behavior that looks so random and chaotic, it's not. This core idea is the absolute foundation of his school of thought, which he called individual psychology. And it's a perspective that, honestly, it completely flips the script on how you look at human behavior. It suggests that all that inconsistency we think we see, it's really just an illusion. So the name individual psychology is actually pretty clever. It comes from the Latin word individuum, which means indivisible. Adler's whole belief was that you can't just chop a person up into conflicting parts. No, the personality is a unified whole, and it's always working in perfect self-consistency. So here's the absolute linchpin of the theory. Adler believed that everything we do, every single thought, every feeling, every action, no matter how weird or nonsensical it seems on the surface, is all being secretly pointed toward a single overarching life goal. If you can figure out what that hidden goal is, all the contradictory behavior suddenly clicks into place. It all makes sense. Okay, so let's take that person who acts totally erratically and unpredictably. From the outside, it just looks like chaos, right? But if you look at it from Adler's point of view, it's actually a brilliant strategy, even if it's unconscious. See, by acting erratically, they confuse everyone around them. They keep people off balance, defensive, always watching. And just like that, the erratic person gains a sense of control, of superiority in that relationship. The behavior isn't random at all. It's serving a very specific hidden purpose. But you might be wondering, okay, where's the proof for all this unity? Well, Adler pointed to some fascinating evidence, and he started with the body itself. He had this incredible idea he called organ dialect, basically the theory that our physical bodies can express our psychological goals without us ever saying a word. This is such a powerful idea. Adler is saying that when we can't, or maybe we won't, say something with our mouths, another part of our body will just say it for us. Our physical symptoms, our aches and pains, they can be a form of communication, a way of revealing our true opinions and goals. So Adler would use this classic example to show how this works in real life. It's about a man who was suffering from some really severe rheumatoid arthritis in his hands. You know, his joints were deformed and he was in constant pain. So what are the hands saying? Adler argued they are speaking the man's life goal without him ever having to make a sound. It's like they're sending out this silent broadcast to the world that says, look at me, look how I suffer. You can't possibly expect me to do hard work. His physical ailment, in this view, perfectly serves his underlying goal, which is to get sympathy and avoid certain responsibilities. All right, here's another one that'll really make you think. Imagine a young boy who, by all accounts, is super obedient during the day, does everything his parents ask, but at night, he consistently wets the bed. And the parents, they're just frustrated. They see it as a simple behavioral problem. But Adler, he saw something completely different. He saw that the boy can't defy his parents openly. His goal is to be the obedient son. But another part of him, it wants to rebel. So his body finds another way to express that defiance. As Adler so brilliantly puts it, his bladder is doing the talking. It's this creative expression of his real desire not to obey, all while his conscious mind gets to keep up the appearance of being the perfect, good son. Okay, so if the body is in on the act, what about the mind? We're so used to thinking of the conscious and the unconscious mind as being at war with each other, right? That's the classic Freudian idea. But Adler, he saw it completely differently. Yeah, for Adler, there is no war. There's no battle. The conscious and unconscious are not enemies fighting for control. They are partners. They're two parts of the same unified system, both cooperating and working together toward that same single life goal we've been talking about. And his distinction between them is actually super simple, but it's a huge shift in thinking. The conscious mind, that's just the part of your personal goal that you're aware of, the part you get. The unconscious isn't some dark, scary basement filled with monsters. It's just the part of your goal that you haven't figured out yet. It's not working against you. It's just not yet understood by you. And this Adler quote really nails that fluid relationship. There's no hard wall between them. The very moment you have that aha insight, you know, when you finally understand why you keep doing that thing you do, boom, that unconscious tendency has just become conscious. It was always part of you, always on your team, just waiting for you to catch on. So we've seen how behavior that looks random, the secret language of our bodies, and even the unconscious mind all point towards this one unified self. So let's bring all these threads together now. So if we boil it all down, what have we got? First, your personality is a unified whole. Second, that means inconsistent behavior is basically an illusion. Third, all your actions, everything, points toward a single hidden goal. Fourth, your body and your mind are a team, working together to express this goal. And finally, the unconscious is just the part of that goal you don't quite get yet. If you take only one thing away from this, let it be this. According to Alfred Adler, you are not at war with yourself. You are not just some messy collection of contradictory impulses. Every single piece of you, your conscious thoughts, your hidden urges, your weird physical quirks, it's all aligned. It's all moving in the exact same direction, toward one single personal goal. And that leaves all of us with a really fascinating and maybe a kind of challenging final question to ask ourselves. If everything you think and everything you feel and everything you do is a clue, what is it all pointing to? What single unifying goal is driving you?
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down a really fascinating psychological concept from Alfred Adler. It gets right to the heart of what makes you, you, by framing your entire life as, well, as a unique piece of music. So think about this for a second. If your life were a piece of music, what would it sound like? Is it a high-energy pop song, a complex classical symphony, or maybe a simple, steady beat? This idea, your life's own personal melody, that's exactly what we're digging into today. The psychologist Alfred Adler actually had a name for this. He called it the style of life. It's basically your unique and consistent personality structure. It's the lens you see the world through, how you go after your goals, how you treat other people. It's the fundamental flavor of your life.
And this is where the music analogy gets really brilliant. Adler argued that you can't understand a person by just looking at one thing they do. Those are just single notes. To really get who someone is, you have to hear their entire melody, their complete style of life. Just like the quote says, without that whole melody, the notes by themselves just don't mean anything.
Okay, so that brings up the big question, right? Where does this personal melody, this style of life actually come from? I mean, how is the music written in the first place? Well, according to Adler, your life's melody is composed from 3 key ingredients. First, you've got heredity. That's the raw genetic stuff you're born with. Then, there's your environment, your family, your culture, all the experiences that shape you. But here's the most important part, the real game changer, your creative power. This is your unique ability to interpret and make sense of the first 2. See, you're not just a puppet of your genes and your childhood. You're the one who actively shapes those things into your own unique style of life. And get this is the part of Adler's theory that's really kind of shocking. He argued that this basic blueprint, your core style of life, is pretty much established by the time you're just 4 or 5 years old. Think about that for a second. The core melody of your entire life is written when you're barely out of your toddler years. And from that point on, yeah, you can learn and grow, of course. But most of your actions, your choices, your gut reactions, they all tend to follow and reinforce this fundamental pattern. It becomes the main theme that the rest of your life's music is built around. But hold on. Having an established melody doesn't mean you're stuck playing the same 4 notes for the rest of your life. Your style of life isn't supposed to be a cage. Adler saw it more on a spectrum, distinguishing between what you might call rigid or flexible lives. Really, the difference between a simple, repetitive tune and a rich, complex symphony. And this comparison just illustrates the whole idea perfectly. On one side, you have the inflexible or unhealthy person. They're kind of stuck playing a simple, repetitive little tune, unable to find new ways to react to things. But on the other side, you've got the healthy individual. They're like a master composer. They act in all sorts of flexible ways, always seeing new paths to success, always creating new options. Their life isn't just one tune. It's a dynamic, rich symphony, just brimming with possibilities. But Adler took it even one step further. He believed that the absolute healthiest, most well-adjusted style of life wasn't just flexible for its own sake. No, it was one that was actively engaged with the world and contributing to it. This is where a person goes from just writing a good tune to composing a true masterpiece. He called this the socially useful style of life, and it's defined by a deep interest in others that is expressed through action. See, someone with this style doesn't just sit around thinking good thoughts. They're actively trying to solve life's big problems, and they do it through cooperation and a real desire to help other people out. So where do they apply this healthy, creative style? Well, Adler said they apply it to what he saw as the 3 great challenges of life: our relationships with our community, our ability to form deep, intimate connections, and our contribution to society through our work. And what really sets them apart is how they tackle these things. They don't approach life's challenges from a selfish place. They face them with a spirit of cooperation, with real personal courage, and with a genuine driving desire to make things better for everyone. For Adler, this was way more than just a healthy personality type. This was a huge deal. He truly believed that people with a socially useful style of life were literally the peak of human potential, that they represented the direction our entire species should be evolving toward. So this all leaves us with one final, really powerful thought. Your life's melody, it isn't finished. It's not set in stone. Adler's most empowering idea is that creative power. You're not just a passive listener to the music of your life. You are the composer. So knowing you have that power, the power to interpret, to choose, to create, what new notes, What new movements are you going to choose to compose? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really big idea from the psychologist Alfred Adler, something he called the creative power of choice. So, let's just start with a huge question. One we all probably ask ourselves at some point. Are you just a product of your past, of your genes and your environment? Is your life basically already mapped out for you?
It's a pretty heavy thought, right? But what if that's not the whole story? Well, the psychologist Alfred Adler came along and proposed a completely different and way more powerful alternative. So, to really get a handle on his idea, we first have to tackle that big question. Are you really in control?
And that question, right there, it leads us straight to the heart of Adler's entire philosophy, a concept he called creative power.
So, what on earth is it? Well, Adler's definition is pretty clear. He saw creative power as the freedom every single one of us has to create our own style of life. But here's the kicker. It makes us responsible for who we are and what we do. It's on us.
I mean, listen to how Adler himself put it. So simple, but so profound.
He's not saying it's just a nice little personality trait. Nope. He's saying this creative power is the very thing that sets us free. It's what makes us individuals, not just puppets of our circumstances.
And this isn't some kind of switch you just flip on or off. Adler saw it as something active, something dynamic. For him, our entire mental world, our whole psychic life is about moving toward a goal. And the cool part is, we help set that goal.
Okay, this is where the idea gets really practical and easy to grasp. We're going to talk about one of Adler's most famous analogies. Your life's materials are the bricks, not the blueprint.
Now, I can practically hear you thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but come on. What about my DNA? What about the family I grew up in? Surely that stuff matters. And you know what? Adler would 100% agree with you. He just saw their role differently.
See, he didn't dismiss any of it. Instead, he completely reframed it. Your genetics, your childhood experiences, your social setting, all of that isn't your destiny. It's just your building materials. It's the bricks and mortar you have to work with.
And this is just the perfect way to picture it. Over here, you've got the raw materials, the stuff you were given, right? Heredity, environment, the bricks and mortar. But you are the architect. Your choices, your style of life, that's the design. You're the one deciding what kind of structure to build with the materials you've got.
And this quote just hammers the point home. It's not about what you've been given. It's about what you do with what you've been given. That's the part that really matters. The way you put those materials to use is what defines everything.
Now, to make this even more concrete, Adler used another super simple but really brilliant analogy. He called it the low doorway test.
He used this little thought experiment to show how our creative power works in the real world. When we run up against one of life's many obstacles. Okay, so imagine this. You have to walk through a doorway, but it's really low, say only 4 feet high. That's the problem. So what do? Well, the healthy choice, according to Adler, is to use your creative power, see the problem for what it is, decide to bend down and walk through. Simple. But the other choice, what he called the neurotic choice, is to just try and walk straight through, bump your head, fall back, and then probably complain about how unfair the low doorway is. And here is the whole point of the story. You are not forced to stoop, and you are definitely not forced to bump your head. The doorway is just a fact. The obstacle is just there. How you approach it, whether you adapt and succeed or resist and fail, that choice is entirely up to you. So all of this, it brings us right to the end, to the most important question of all, and it's a question for you. What will you build?
So let's just recap the big idea here. At the end of the day, we're more than just our genes and our past. We actually have the power to act on our world, not just be shaped by it. We're the ones responsible for our life's goals, and we get to decide how we're going to strive for them. Which means, ultimately, we are free individuals.
And this brings us right back to where we started. This one sentence just captures the whole thing perfectly. It's a declaration of personal power. Who you are today is because of the use you have made of your unique set of bricks and mortar. And so I'll leave you with this. It's really the only question that's left to answer. Given the materials you've got and the incredible creative power you hold as the architect of your own life, what are you going to build?
You know that feeling when you feel like you're carrying this enormous weight, just struggling with challenges that feel completely overwhelming? Well, what if that weight wasn't even real? Today, we're going to dive into the incredible work of psychologist Alfred Adler to really understand these psychological fortresses we sometimes build around ourselves, one painful brick at a time.
Adler hits us with this powerful idea right out of the gate. He truly believed that, within our limits, we are the architects of our own lives. We have this creative power to shape who we become. It's a really empowering thought, but if it's true, well, it brings up a pretty tough question.
I mean, think about it. If we have all this freedom, why do we so often end up constructing these elaborate defenses that just trap us? Why do we build fortresses that actually keep us away from the very things we say we want? That's the big puzzle we're going to try and solve in this explainer.
To find the answer, Adler didn't just look at the symptoms. He went deeper. He searched for a common thread, a single root cause for all our psychological struggles. And he was convinced he found it in one fundamental part of being human.
That root cause is what he called social interest. Now, this isn't just about being friendly or polite. No, it's way deeper. It's a real, genuine feeling of belonging to the human community, a true concern for other people. Adler's big argument was that when this feeling is underdeveloped, that's when the foundation for our psychological fortress gets laid.
So what does a life that's lacking this social interest actually look like? Well, Adler saw a very clear pattern. Without that connection to others, our goals can become ridiculously high because we're always trying to prove how much better we are. We start to live in our own little private world with our own private rules. And that leads to a really rigid, dogmatic lifestyle where our concerns are the only things that matter.
But this kind of thing doesn't just pop up out of nowhere, right? Adler traced this lack of social interest all the way back to our earliest years. He identified 3 specific childhood situations that can set us on the path to building that private, isolated world.
He pointed to 3 main external factors, or paths, that can lead us here. Let's take a look at the first one.
So the first path involves what Adler called exaggerated physical deficiencies. But here's the key, and he was very clear about this. It's not the deficiency itself that's the problem, not at all. It's the overwhelming feelings of inferiority that it can create. Someone on this path might feel like they're living in enemy territory, constantly driven to overcompensate, and seeing the world as a place they have to conquer for themselves.
Now, the second path is so interesting because it's completely counterintuitive, a pampered life. Adler argued that this doesn't create a feeling of being loved, but actually the opposite. See, when everything is done for a child, the unspoken message they get is, "You're not capable." This totally stunts their social interest, and they grow up expecting the world to cater to them and then get hit with huge anxiety when it, doesn't.
And that leads us to the third path, the path of neglect. Kids who feel unloved and unwanted, well, they create a whole style of life built on that feeling. They end up with very little confidence, they tend to see society as an enemy, and they're often super distrustful and envious of anyone else's success. They feel alienated and just can't cooperate for the common good.
Okay, so that faulty foundation has been laid in childhood. Now let's look at the actual walls of the fortress, the behaviors we use to protect our fragile sense of self.
Adler gave these behaviors a name, safeguarding tendencies, and they have one job and one job only, to protect an inflated but very, very fragile sense of self-esteem from being exposed or publicly humiliated. They are the defensive walls of our fortress. Now, to put this into perspective, it's really helpful to compare them to something you've probably heard of, Freud's defense mechanisms. While Freud's were all about unconscious acts to protect the ego from anxiety, Adler believed these safeguarding tendencies are often conscious. We know we're doing them. Their goal isn't really to manage some inner anxiety, it's to shield our public image from the shame of failure.
So what do these walls actually look like in real life? Adler grouped them into 3 main categories. You can kind of think of them as the bricks, the mortar, and the watchtowers we use to build our psychological fortress. The 3 main ways we safeguard ourselves are through excuses, aggression, and withdrawal. Let's break down exactly what he meant by each of those. First up, excuses.
Oh boy, this is the most common one, and it usually takes the form of yes, but, or if only. You hear it constantly. Yes, I would love to do that, but, or if only I had a better boss, I would have. These excuses are so clever because they protect us from ever having to really test ourselves, keeping our inflated self-worth safe and sound.
The second tendency, aggression, is all about safeguarding our self-esteem by going on the attack. This can look like depreciation, putting down other people's accomplishments to make yourself feel better. Or it could be accusation, just straight up blaming somebody else for your failures. And then there's the most complicated one, self-accusation. This is where expressions of guilt or self-pity are actually weapons, designed to make others feel bad and ultimately protect that fragile ego.
And the final tendency is withdrawal, which is all about creating safety through distance. As you can see, it's like a strategic retreat. We might start moving backward to a time in our life that felt safer, or we just stand still, avoiding any new risks so there's no chance of failure. This often means hesitating until an opportunity just passes us by, telling ourselves it's too late now. We might even construct our own little obstacles just so we can feel the success of overcoming some.
So we've built this whole fortress with excuses, aggression, and withdrawal. It feels safe in there. But Adler had this really brilliant way of showing us the truth behind these walls.
This quote just paints such a vivid picture. Adler saw people who stagger around, looking totally crushed by life's challenges. Their struggle gets them sympathy, and more importantly, a perfect excuse to avoid any real tests. But the weight, he says, is a dummy, it's fake, it's a performance. We could, as he put it, dance with the load under which we stagger. It's all a swindle.
And right there, that's the big paradox. These fortresses feel like they're protecting us, but they're actually profoundly self-defeating. They block the one and only thing that leads to real, authentic self-esteem, a genuine connection with other people. The very walls we build to protect ourselves are the same walls that keep us isolated with our fake heavy weight. This brings us to the final and most essential question Adler's work asks every single one of us. Maybe it's not about what's holding you back, but about what you're choosing to hold on to. What could you accomplish if you just dropped the weight? What becomes possible when you're finally willing to walk out into the world without the fortress?
Why are you, you? I mean, really, why are you the way you are? It's probably one of the biggest questions we ever ask ourselves. Well, in this explainer, we're going to crack open the toolkit of a pioneering psychologist named Alfred Adler. And trust me, we're going to find some pretty incredible answers inside.
I mean, just think about it for a second. If you've got siblings, how come you're all so different? You grew up in the exact same house, right? Or what about those super vivid, kind of random feeling memories from when you were a little kid? Well, get this. Adler's work says they're not random at all. Nope, they're clues.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to look at Alfred Adler's work, but not as some dusty old academic theory you'd find in a textbook. No way. We're treating it like a practical, hands-on toolkit. It's like having 4 powerful instruments you can start using like right now to make sense of your own life story.
So first, we'll tackle your unique spot in your family. Then, we're going to decode those early memories and even your dreams. And to wrap it all up, we'll get into Adler's amazing ideas for how to move forward. All right, let's open this thing up.
Okay, tool number 1 is what Adler called the family constellation. And no, we're not talking about horoscopes or looking at the stars here. This is all about the very first social universe you were ever a part of, your family.
So, Adler believed this map, your birth order, whether you had brothers or sisters, the age gaps between you all, he believed it seriously shaped your entire worldview. It was your first training round. It's where you figured out how to compete, when to cooperate, and really, how to find your place in the world for the first time. And here is where it gets really, really interesting. Adler started seeing these patterns. So, take the oldest kid. They're often great organizers, right? But also pretty anxious. And why is that? Well, they're the only ones who've been dethroned by a new baby. Then you have the youngest, who can be super ambitious, but also a little dependent, because they're used to everyone else clearing the path. So as you're looking at this, try not to just see the words on the screen. Think about the feeling behind them. Do you see yourself or your siblings in there?
But wait, here's the kicker. This is what makes Adler's whole idea so brilliant. He was adamant that it's not just about your birth order. It's about how you saw it, how you interpreted it.
Was your big brother a rival you had to beat or a guide who showed you the ropes? Was your little sister a pain or someone you had to protect? Like he said himself, your perception of the whole deal, that's way more important than just your number in the line.
And that idea of perception, it leads us perfectly into tool number 2, your earliest memories. Now, Adler had a completely mind-bending take on this stuff. He believed they weren't, perfect recordings of history. He saw them as the personal stories, the myths we tell ourselves about who we are.
Okay, this is a bit of a wild idea, so stick with me here. Adler's big claim was that your memories don't cause you to be who you are. It's actually the other way around. Your personality right now, what he called your style of life, acts like a filter. It kind of reaches back into the giant archive of your past and pulls out only the memories that fit the story you're already telling yourself today.
Let me give you a perfect example. This one comes from one of Adler's actual patients. He was a successful guy, but he had this deep, deep distrust of women. And what was his very first memory? It was this. It starts to rain, his mom picks him up and holds him close, but then she puts him down to go pick up his younger brother instead.
Do you see the twist there? For Adler, that moment didn't make him distrustful. His distrust was already there. It was part of his style of life, and that's what made that specific memory stick. It's the perfect evidence for his core belief, which is something like, see, the people who are supposed to care for me will always replace me with someone else. The memory is just a reflection of that belief. It's not the cause of it. Mind-blowing, right?
All right, let's grab our third tool from the kit, and this one takes us into the mysterious world of our dreams. Now, while a lot of other psychologists were looking at dreams to understand the past, Adler did a total 180. He thought dreams were all about the future. He saw them as these little clues, often in disguise, about the problems we're gearing up to face.
Yeah, Adler saw dreams as creating this kind of emotional mood music for the challenges just over the horizon. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch. The dream usually wraps its real message up in a metaphor. It's almost like it's trying to trick us, especially if the truth is something we're not quite ready to deal with head on.
And he didn't just use this on his patients, he used it on himself. So, the night before he's about to take his first trip to America, which was a huge life-changing career move, he has this incredibly intense dream. He dreamed his ship capsized, he lost all his belongings, and he had to swim, all by himself, to a brand new land.
So what do you think he did? Cancel the trip? Freak out? Not a chance. He realized the dream wasn't a scary warning. It was a mission statement. It was his own ambition getting him ready for the fight, basically telling him, hey, you've got to find the courage to break away from your old life in Vienna and count on nothing but your own strength to make it in this new world.
And that brings us to our final, and you could argue most powerful tool in the whole kit. So we've used family, memories, and dreams to figure out how we got to be who we are. Now, Adler gives us a clear path for what to do next. And this isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about real, tangible, meaningful growth.
And the goal of all this growth? It's actually beautifully simple. Number 1, boost your courage. Number 2, lessen those nagging feelings of inferiority that we all get. And number 3, build up what he called social interests, which is really just a fancy way of saying your sense of belonging and connection to other people. It's all about becoming a braver, more connected you.
And to cut through all the excuses that we all build up for ourselves, Adler had this killer question he would ask people. He'd just look at them and say, what would you do if I cured you immediately? Just think about that for a second. Your answer, whatever it is, instantly shows you what you really want and, at the same time, what you're afraid of going after. It just cuts through the noise and puts all the power right back in your lap. Which leads us to his personal motto. And really, this is the engine that drives his entire way of thinking. Everybody can accomplish everything. I mean, what an incredibly optimistic and powerful statement about what we're capable of. He genuinely believed that we are the architects of our own lives.
And honestly, if you only remember one single thing from this entire explainer, please let it be this. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what cards you were dealt, your birth order, your past struggles, any of it. According to Adler, what truly defines you is what you do with those cards. So as we close the lid on this toolkit, the spotlight turns right back around onto you, your family history. those early memories, even your dreams. Look, they're just clues. They are not life sentences. They are tools to help you understand, not chains to hold you back. Your life is a story, and you are holding the pen. So the only real question left is, what are you going to write in the next chapter?